ये कहानी है इंडिया के सबसे रिस्पेक्टेड ब्रांड की। चाहे एम्प्लॉइज हो या वर्कफोर्स, स्टेक होल्डर्स या कंज्यूमर्स, सब टाटा के जॉब्स, सर्विसेज और प्रोडक्ट्स को प्रेफर करते हैं। बट देयर वाज अ टाइम व्हेन दे हैड लॉस्ट एवरीथिंग बिकॉज ऑफ द सोशलिस्ट गवर्नमेंट पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस, और इनका लेबर ऑफ लव एयर इंडिया इनसे छीन लिया गया था। सो हाउ डिड दे मैनेज टू अनडू द डैमेज एंड टेक बैक व्हाट वाज ऑलरेडी देयर्स? Let's start from the beginning. By only 29 years of age, Jamsetji Tata had already helped expand his father's export business and establish subsidiaries abroad and a network of distribution spanned across countries such as Japan, China and Great Britain. Then he started his own export business, and using the profits he earned, he began building textile mills of his own. जमशेदजी टाटा ने जो अब्रॉड जाके सीखा था, वो सारे बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस वो अपने बिजनेसेस में भी इनकॉर्पोरेट करना चाहते थे। His mills were the first ones in India to see employee benefits such as paid leaves, sickness leaves and pensions. He was inspired by the Industrial Revolution happening in Europe and wanted something similar for his country. So he started working on steel production plants like the ones he had seen in Germany, and a hydroelectric project which was inspired by the one he saw in Niagara Falls. He recognized the power of tourism and started building hotels like the Taj Mahal Palace in 1903, which even now is probably the most iconic hotel in India. He highly valued education and donated acres of land to the Indian Institute of Science. This man who founded Tata Sons was India's first industrialist and is still deemed to be one of the biggest philanthropists in the world. The industrial town that he founded in 1919, Sakchi, was renamed to Jamshedpur or Tata Nagar after its highly respected founder. अब जब उनके successor की बात आई तो a very interesting person was chosen. J.R.D. Tata grew up in France and learned how to fly there. He became the first licensed pilot in India और वो airplanes के लिए बहुत passionate थे. So unsurprisingly, he was the one who started India's first airline, Air India. Now the real story begins. ये शुरुआत में टाटा एयरमेल था। इसकी पहली फ्लाइट कराची से बॉम्बे वाया अहमदाबाद की थी, and of course J.R.D. flew it himself, taking the help of the railway lines beneath him to guide him in the right direction. पहले साल में ही एयरमेल ने 300 फ्लाइट्स लिए, carrying 10 tons of mail plus 155 passengers who had to crouch inside the planes and sit on mail boxes. It made a profit of 60,000 rupees in the very first year, a healthy return of 30% on his 2 lakh investment. Then started commercial flights, seeing the growing need for air travel. Gradually, Tata Airmail changed to Air Services, then Tata Airlines, and finally in 1948, Air India International. Now, after independence, the brand new socialist government made it illegal to run an airline business overnight and nationalized Air India along with all the other airline companies. But J.R.D. was still made the chairman because everyone knew that he was spectacular at his job. This man used to personally go and inspect planes. If he saw dirty counters, he used to grab a cloth and start cleaning it himself. One time, he even helped the crew unclog a dirty toilet in an aircraft. Air India was known for its impeccable service. People from all over the world, including billionaires and members of the royal families, flew in their flights. Some of the best airlines right now, including Singapore Airlines, design their flight experience and aircrafts to resemble Air India's. 1977 tak, till J.R.D. was the chairman, Air India soared to great heights. But something horrible happened. On the New Year's Eve of 1978, Emperor Ashoka, a flight that was in use for over 6 years, crashed into the sea off the coast of Bombay just a few minutes after taking off, killing 213 passengers and crew. Within a month, Morarji Desai dropped J.R.D. from the chairmanship of Air India despite protests from his cabin crew and officials. J.R.D. was terrified because he knew that government employees would not be able to run an airline, which turned out to be a prophecy. Important positions like sales, marketing and commercial operations were handed over to people from outside the industry with zero experience. By 2007, they had losses up to 448 crores. In 2009, the government ordered 111 aircrafts when they only needed 11, putting a huge burden on debt and interest payments. Then they merged Air India International and Indian Airlines to cope with the losses, but that was a horrible idea. Now you can clearly see that Air India was nosediving, but we'll come back to that in a bit. JRD's heart was crushed, but he did not let that get in the way of his business. He continued focusing on growing his other businesses such as Tata Motors, and over the course of his 52 years of leadership, JRD expanded the Tata Group from 14 companies to 95. But again, to do that, he had to dramatically lower the ownership Tata Sons had in each one, because in 1969, the Indian government introduced the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act, which was essentially targeted at Tata, even though they were far from a monopoly. But as JRD expanded the group and lowered their ownership in the subsidiaries, he started losing control, and some of his companies were just not performing. As TISCO, Tata Iron and Steel Company Limited, was their largest private enterprise at that time, it bore the brunt of this act. Slowly, TISCO was forced to give way to government-owned Hindustan Steel and then a competitor, Jindal Iron and Steel Company. TISCO fell from the top position to the 11th position in India in the 90s. But then, a dramatic restructuring happened. In a decade, Tata Steel's workforce was halved, the plants were modernized with new technologies, and a management mindset was instilled, one which could dream big. Guess what position Tata Steel is in now? Number 1 globally, according to the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. Who do you think is responsible for that? The man, the myth, the legend, Ratan Tata, of course. This man, even though he came from this massive super rich family and had a very comfortable upbringing abroad, had to earn his way to the top. He started his job at Tata Sons in 1962 at the age of 25, working on the floor with his fellow workers, shoveling limestone and handling the glass furnace at factories. He had gotten a job offer from IBM but chose to work at his family's company, partly because his grandmother wanted him to stay back in Jamsetji and he loved her to bits. His first major project came in 1971. It was pretty challenging. One of the companies that was struggling a lot was Nelco. In 1950s, it was India's biggest producer of radios, but 20 years later, it had fallen to a 3% market share. Ratan had a bird's eye view, quite literally, because instead of only focusing on the business aspect of it, he focused also on technology and future, and funded the development of new products such as satellite communications, which automatically restored Nelco in the 1980s. He claimed leadership of the Tata Group in 1991, right as the economic liberalization was unraveling in India. But that also meant that they'd have to deal with a lot of foreign competition now. Plus, JRD had let Tata decentralize, so it would be even harder to adapt to new competitors. So Ratan had no choice but to re-establish ownership over all the Tata subsidiaries. He sold 20% of Tata Sons and used that money to buy shares in the subsidiaries, especially Tata Motors and Tata Steel, then reorganized all of them into 7 sectors: defense and aerospace, services, financial services, realty and infrastructure, consumer and retail, manufacturing, and communications and ITES. But despite all this, in the 1990s, they were losing business to international companies. But Ratan responded promptly and smartly by acquiring foreign companies into the Tata Group, effectively buying all of their talent, supply chains and experience to strengthen his business in India while also expanding internationally. His buying spree began in 2000 when Tata Tea acquired Tetley. Over the next decade, he continued acquiring hundreds of companies for every subsidiary in the Tata Group. Most notably, he purchased the European steel titan Chorus for $12 billion in 2007 and then Jaguar and Land Rover for $2 billion in 2008. This international buying spree has been paying dividends for Tata, and today, the majority of their revenues actually comes from outside of India. This is such an epic example of turning adversities in your favor. Most importantly, Tata was finally able to take back what always belonged to them. Earlier this year, Tata acquired Air India from the government for 18,000 crores. Tata now owns Trent, which operates Westside, one of India's biggest fashion retail brands. In 2012, Tata brought Starbucks to India through a 50-50 joint venture between the famous coffee chain and Tata Global Beverages. Do you know how Nano came into existence? Ratan Tata once saw a family of 4 traveling on a bike while it was raining cats and dogs in Mumbai. This is what inspired him to build the most affordable car in India. It didn't sell as much as Tata had hoped it would, but it definitely brought about a wave of affordable cars in the country as every other brand wanted to make one after seeing Nano. And competition in the market is always good for the consumers. The profit of the Tata Group grew 50 times during the 21 years of leadership of Ratan Tata. He changed it from an India-based business to a global entity. Ratan Tata isn't the chairperson of Tata Sons anymore, but let's hope this legacy that's been left behind by all of the iconic leaders of the Tata family continues to thrive forever.